The rain hammered against the diner's windows like nature's own percussion, each droplet carrying the weight of Marcus Rivera's exhaustion. At 2 a.m., the fluorescent lights hummed their lonely song over empty vinyl booths, and the coffee had long since turned bitter in the pot. Marcus wiped his hands on his grease-stained apron, counting the measly tips from another grueling 16-hour shift. $53.42. Barely enough to cover his daughter Sophia's asthma medication, let alone the rent that was already 2 weeks overdue. The bell above the door chimed with desperate urgency, cutting through the silence like a knife. A woman stumbled in, her designer clothes soaked through, clutching a screaming infant against her chest. Her mascara had painted dark rivers down her cheeks, and her hands trembled as she tried to calm the inconsolable baby. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do you have anything at all? She won't stop crying. I've tried everything." Marcus had seen desperation before. Hell, he lived with it every day. But something about this woman's raw panic struck him differently. Maybe it was the way she held her baby, like the world might crumble if she let go. Maybe it was the recognition of a parent at their absolute breaking point. "Ma'am, we're actually closed," Marcus started, then stopped. The baby's cries pierced through his exhaustion, awakening something deeper than professional obligation. "But, come on back. Let me see what I can do." The woman, who would later introduce herself as Catherine Morrison, though Marcus didn't know her name meant anything to anyone, followed him behind the counter. Her baby, maybe 8 months old, had worked herself into a frenzy that no amount of bouncing or shushing could calm. "When did she last eat?" Marcus asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "Hours ago, but she won't take her bottle. She won't take anything." Catherine's voice cracked. I'm not very good at this." Marcus glanced at her, recognizing the shame that came with feeling like you were failing your child. He'd worn that expression plenty of times himself. "How old?" 8 months. "Her name's Emma." Marcus nodded, his mind already working. He'd been exactly where Catherine was now, alone with a crying baby, feeling helpless and desperate. When Sophia was teething, she'd go days barely eating, and Marcus had learned to get creative. "I might have something," he said, firing up the burner. "My daughter went through the same thing." From the walk-in cooler, Marcus pulled ingredients that wouldn't make sense to anyone else. Sweet potato, a small container of bone broth he'd made fresh that morning, a touch of cinnamon, and a banana that was perfectly ripe. Catherine watched, bewildered, as this tired man in a stained apron began creating something that looked more like baby food than diner fare. "Sweet potatoes easy on the stomach," Marcus explained as he worked, his movements sure despite his exhaustion. "The broth adds protein without being heavy. Cinnamon's a natural stomach soother, and the banana." He smiled for the first time all night. Kids just love bananas. As he cooked, Marcus found himself talking, really talking, for the first time in months. About Sophia, about the nights when she was inconsolable and nothing worked except patience and love. About how being a parent meant improvising, adapting, never giving up even when you wanted to collapse. Catherine listened, bouncing Emma gently, and for the first time in hours, the baby's cries began to quiet. Maybe it was the rhythmic sound of Marcus cooking, or the warm smells filling the kitchen, but something was shifting. "I used to think love was enough," Catherine said quietly. "That wanting to be a good mother would somehow make me one." "Love is everything," Marcus replied, tasting the mixture and adjusting the seasoning. "But sometimes love looks like admitting you don't know what you're doing and asking for help." When Marcus finished, he'd created something that looked simple but smelled like comfort itself. He cooled it carefully, tested the temperature twice, and handed Catherine a small spoon. "Try this." Emma took the first spoonful hesitantly, then eagerly reached for more. Within minutes, she was eating enthusiastically, her cries replaced by the satisfied sounds of a hungry baby finally being fed. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "How did you know?" "Trial and error. Lots of error." Marcus began cleaning up, but his movements were slower now, less urgent. "Sophia's mom left when she was 4 months old. Said she couldn't handle the responsibility. I had to learn everything from scratch. How to cook for her, how to comfort her, how to be enough when I felt like nothing. Where is Sophia now?" "Sleeping at my neighbor's. Mrs. Chen watches her when I work nights." Marcus paused, his voice growing softer. "She's 6 now. Wants to be a chef like her dad, except she's going to have her own restaurant and make fancy food for fancy people. He laughed, but Catherine heard the worry underneath. I keep telling her to dream bigger than this place. Catherine fed Emma the last spoonful, watching her daughter's eyes grow heavy with satisfaction. What's your dream? The question caught Marcus off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked him about his dreams, he'd almost forgotten he had any. I used to want to open my own place. Nothing fancy, just somewhere families could come and feel welcome. Where food meant something more than just filling your stomach. What stopped you? Marcus gestured around the empty diner. Life, bills, reality. Catherine was quiet for a long moment, watching her daughter settle into peaceful sleep. I run a foundation, she said finally. We invest in small businesses, people with big dreams who just need someone to believe in them. That's nice, Marcus said, assuming she was making conversation. I've been looking for the right project. Something real, something that matters. She looked up at him. Would you be interested in a partner? Someone who believes in feeding families and creating something meaningful. Marcus stared at her, certain he'd misheard. Ma'am, I appreciate the thought, but I can't afford. No, Catherine interrupted. You don't understand. I'm asking if you'd let me invest in your dream. Full backing, your vision, your rules. The offer hung in the air between them like something too good to be real. Marcus had learned to be suspicious of good fortune. It usually came with strings attached. Why? He asked simply. Catherine looked down at Emma, now sleeping peacefully in her arms. Because you saw a desperate mother and a crying baby at 2 a.m., and instead of turning us away, you created something beautiful. You didn't just feed my daughter, you reminded me what it means to care for someone else more than yourself. She paused, her voice growing thick with emotion. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but I couldn't figure out how to feed my own baby. You have nothing, but you had everything she needed. That's not luck. That's love made visible. 6 months later, Sophia's Kitchen opened its doors in downtown Portland. The restaurant was everything Marcus had dreamed of, warm, welcoming, with a menu that celebrated comfort food elevated by care and creativity. But more than that, it was a place where families came together, where single parents could bring their kids without judgment, where community happened over shared meals. Catherine had kept her word about letting Marcus maintain creative control, but she'd also become something he'd never expected, a friend. She and Emma were regular customers, and watching Emma grow from that crying infant into a babbling toddler who clapped whenever Marcus appeared from the kitchen had become one of his greatest joys. On the restaurant's opening night, as Marcus watched Sophia help serve desserts to tables full of laughing families, he thought about that rainy night in the old diner. Sometimes the most important recipes weren't the ones you planned, they were the ones you created when someone needed you most, when love and instinct guided your hands more than any cookbook ever could. The secret ingredient, he'd learned, was never really about the food at all. It was about seeing someone's need and responding with your whole heart, even when you had nothing left to give. Especially then.